At the moment, the House is working its way through a group of amendments and sub-amendments dealing with second reading of both Bill 21 and Bill 22. This makes for a number of late nights for the members of the House. This afternoon at 4:30, the House will adjourn for a special ceremony, which will be the unveiling of the portrait of the Honourable Peter Lougheed, former Premier of the province of Alberta. The portrait then will be hung in the galleries of the Rotunda immediately following the unveiling today.
Mr. Speaker.
Let us pray. O Lord, grant us a daily awareness of the precious gift of life which you have given us. As members of this legislative assembly, we dedicate our lives anew to the service of our province and our country. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Notices of motions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table with the Assembly today 3 reports, one titled Agriculture Land-Based Study Executive Summary, second titled Agriculture Land-Based Study Summary, the third titled Drainage Potential in Alberta, an Integrated Study.
Deputy Premier, followed by the member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table the response to motion for return number 184, the annual report of Westera College and the annual report of Lakeland College as required by statute.
Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table for the information of all honourable members a copy of a letter from the President of the Alberta Medical Association to all doctors in the province about the current Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care.
Introduction of special guests.
Member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly a group of grade 6 students from Hillside Community School in Grand Prairie. There are 77 in the group, and they are accompanied by their teachers Lance Turing, Janice Sopsak, and John Atkinson. I've asked them to stand and receive the warm welcome to the legislature in the usual fashion.
Edmonton Goldbar, followed by Redwater Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased this afternoon to introduce to you and through you to other members of the Assembly a group of 28 active and interested seniors from the Always Welcome Seniors Group in Southeast Edmonton, and they're accompanied by Margaret Campbell. Mr. Speaker, they're seated in the public gallery, and I'll ask that they rise and hope that we can welcome them to our legislature in the traditional way.
Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure today to introduce to you and to the rest of the Assembly 26 grade 10 and 12 students from the Andrew School in the village of Andrew and home of the famous Andrew Aces. And they're accompanied by their teachers, Mr. Alan Dubik and Mr. Harry Bidniak, and also bus driver Tommy Rehoritz. They're seated in the public gallery, and then ask they rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I noticed that the Premier went way out on a limb and declared his love for families, Mr. Speaker. He also presented the Assembly with some recycled Van der Zalm rhetoric. Now, Mr. Speaker, I suppose rhetoric has its place, but let's look at the real-life situation in Alberta today for average families. This government, who loves families, has loaded tax hikes and roadblocks in the face of average Albertans from the first day it was sworn into office. Now the Premier wants to set up a bureaucracy, a new department, to, I suppose, put in a bunch of Tory candidates that haven't got jobs yet, Mr. Speaker. My question, Mr. Speaker, and Albertans want to know this, who is the Premier trying to kid anyhow? And my question is, why does he think he can get away with first punishing average families economically and then setting up an expensive bureaucracy after that?
Hear, hear.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's interesting the honourable member wasn't able to be with us yesterday, and I have no problem with that, but having not been there, I thought he might have checked with Hansard. If you had have checked with Hansard, you could have found that all the things he just said were completely false.
Well, Mr. Speaker, rest assured, I was in a hotel room watching that spectacle last night on question period, Mr. Speaker, so I saw what the Premier said, and I've looked at Hansard, Mr. Speaker. And I thought maybe we'd watched a rerun of Father Knows Best on television, Mr. Speaker. But my question is, if the Premier's serious, Mr. Speaker, if the Premier's serious about helping average families, last year they taxed them about an average of $100 per family. In view of this, Mr. Speaker, in view of the punitive measures last budget, how does this government policies contribute to the economic and social survival of the family?
It's interesting, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member would talk about taxation, when of course Alberta has the lowest taxation in Canada.
That's right.
This government not only just lowered taxes in the last budget, but in fact, in addition, reduced taxes in a disproportional way on the lower income families. Some 500,000 Albertans received not just a tax cut, but in addition a larger tax cut in relation to their incomes. This government has always supported families. I understand the honourable member may not like the fact that we're going to make sure that we support families in this province. I know the socialists like to have people out of the family into institutions. Into institutions, Mr. Speaker, but we are not for institutional care. We are going to strengthen the family. We know that it is the strongest.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. We'll just all sit still until things settle down, including Athabasca Laklabish. Mr. Premier.
I might say, Mr. Speaker, the initiatives that our government will be bringing and are following in the area of strengthening families and communities in this province are ones that we're very serious about. The honourable members opposite, the socialists, may wish to try and knock that position, but that's fine. But we consider the family the basic unit in this province.
Supplementary question.
That's also wonderful. But the question I asked, he didn't answer. If you care so much about the family, as you say you do, why did you tax them over $1 billion last year, and that put real hardship on the families? If you're serious about it, revoke those taxes, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've just dealt with it, but I want to deal with it again. We have the lowest taxes in Canada. That's to put dollars in the hands of family, disposable income. Then we have no sales tax, the only province in Canada, Mr. Speaker. This is a government who cares about families. This is a government who helps families and helps most those families who can't help themselves. That's the record in this province. For the honourable member to somehow say that this government is placing punitive taxes on families doesn't even know what he's talking about.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Not only did they raise taxes from average people over $1 billion, we found new ways to tax people, user fees of almost every sort. We also cut back in educational opportunities and healthcare opportunities. And people want to know, before the rhetoric, the Van der Zalm rhetoric from this premier, how is that helping the average family's stress level in terms of economics and social policy, Mr. Speaker? How does that help?
Well, we understand, Mr. Speaker. I know the position of the opposition is that if things are going well in the province, they don't like it. And if you're helping families, they don't like it. They tend to feel that the best time for them is when things can be very negative. They tend to feel, Mr. Speaker, that things are best for them when they can paint a negative picture in this province. Well, you cannot paint a negative picture on health care for Albertans, education for Albertans, or the taxation of Albertans. We have the best health care, we have the best education in Canada, and we have the lowest taxes in Canada. We're going to continue to do that, but in addition to it, we are going to fight any efforts to downplay family strength in this province. We're going to make sure that the future of this province is built on strong families and strong communities.
Edmonton Goldbar, followed by Little Bow.
Mr. Speaker, will the Premier, after all the smoke has cleared, now admit that his statements about how to strengthen family life are really meaningless and irrelevant without substantive and creative ideas about what to do about it?
Mr. Speaker, I'm interested the honourable member would raise that issue, because yesterday, if she was following Hansard, I asked her and all members to provide initiatives. I welcomed them and thought that we might hear some. We haven't heard a thing so far, just negative comments. I might say, Mr. Speaker, the government has helped and will continue to help families. I welcome initiatives from the honourable member. Be a positive force for a change in Alberta. And the same with the members of the Socialist Party. I welcome them with their ideas if they have any. No ideas. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say this to all members. The government is very serious about the support for the family. It is not detracting from daycare. It's not detracting from shelters for children or mothers or husbands who need shelter. But it is a positive initiative, not negative to anything else, positive to supporting the family. And if the honourable member has any suggestions, I would welcome them. But with or without her suggestions, we're going to build the family in this province.
Little Bow.
Much question to the Premier. The Premier has indicated that he believes that daycare is really no substitute for family care, and I would agree with that as well. My question to the Premier, would the Premier consider approaching the federal government in terms of their daycare announcement recently and opting out of that program and its federal thrust and putting in place a provincial thrust with those funds in terms of family solidarity, family building?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the federal initiatives at the current time, I think, are not cast in stone. And as our Minister of Social Services has said in the past, she is working with and negotiating with the federal minister to try and mold the program into a form that best fits the needs in Alberta. As the honourable member knows, with the success of the Meech Lake proposal, and let's hope that it passes as it has here, that we would then have the option of opting out. I think it's too early to say that that is a course we should follow. I would rather try and convince the federal government about making necessary changes. One of the items which I find a big problem for me in their current program is the fact that it tilts the advantages to those parents who do have their children cared for outside of the home, and does not provide anywhere near the same encouragement or assistance to mothers who, or any parent who cares for the child within the home. And I think that's a big deficiency in that program. And we are working, and the Minister of Social Services is working on a negotiating base at this stage to try and change that type of things. On this program as well, I would say it's a $5 to $11 billion program we're talking about coming from the federal government. There is great scope for initiatives from the honourable member, and I would appreciate discussing it with them any time, or any honourable members, as to how to make it a better program.
Second Vermilion Viking supplementary, final one on this issue.
Yes, to the Minister of Social Services. Will the Minister assure us that she will look at the programs available to single mothers so that they don't promote an environment where it might be better to live alone with your child than to get married to the father?
Mr. Speaker, there is always some concern about the type of programs that we have in support of people who require on a short or a long-term basis some amount of the taxpayers' support in order that they have food, clothing, and shelter. And a great discussion as to whether, in fact, we end up directing people to a certain lifestyle simply because of the way that we indeed fund people. Mr. Speaker, I find it interesting that the opposition, the official opposition, finds that it is somehow funny or that it's a frivolous thing to talk about government programs possibly impacting and actually directing people into a certain lifestyle if they would more likely want to choose something else.
Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
I'd like to designate my second question, member from Edmonton Avonmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Social Services, in view of the Premier's stated support of the family and the fact that at least 11% of Alberta families are characterized by violence, it is extremely important to provide the services needed by a significant number of Alberta families. Early intervention is the key to solving this problem. Would the Minister approach the Minister of Community and Occupational Health to direct additional funds to communities through FCSS to ensure greater availability of early intervention in communities in the forms of counseling and parenting courses?
Mr. Speaker, the two areas that the honourable member mentions are obviously very important, and we would be supportive of comments that suggest that early intervention is important, that in fact FCSS funding could be utilized to, when communities see this in their own community as a problem, that they would prioritize on that basis. The Minister of Community and Occupational Health may want to supplement, but Mr. Speaker, it is well known that this program is unique in Canada and gives communities the individual responsibility of prioritizing those funds, and certainly can direct them in the way that they believe to be appropriate for the social needs that they have identified.
Mr. Speaker, it's not the prioritization but the lack of adequacy of funds for these programs that's of concern. To the Minister, in view of the fact that children raised in families where there is violence may become violent themselves, will the Minister commit funds for treatment programs for children who are not necessarily abused themselves but have witnessed abuse so that violence in the family is not perpetuated?
Mr. Speaker, again, a very important question, and I've heard one honourable member call across that we need to break the syndrome. It is interesting in my perusal of literature on this subject that so many professionals are saying that notwithstanding large sums committed to counselling in this area, and that includes counselling of children who have been victims of family violence, they cannot assure us that, in fact, in the longer term, this counselling will be of benefit. Again, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding that, we have committed very large sums of money in the last 2 years into this area, hoping that we would have some better identification as to how well the children and others have done after this counselling, though I suspect we're going to be looking at longer-term studies.
I would agree there hasn't been time to assess the impact of these. Inasmuch as we all support healthy families, will the Minister commit additional funds for shelters, as shelters are a way of supporting healthy families and allowing battered mothers to remove themselves and their children from unhealthy situations?
Mr. Speaker, once again, a very important question and comment. We believe, and I think the honourable member well knows, that we fund in terms of shelters per capita in this province as well as anybody in the country. Again, that does not mean that more funding wouldn't be of assistance. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is invited at any time to, in her professional capacity, to make comment on how she sees shelters in the longer term as being the answer, though we will support to the best we can shelters to address the short-term situation.
One suggestion would be second stage housing. Given that the only access many rural women have to aid is satellites, not presently funded by this government, will the minister commit funds to rural satellites and provide a province-wide toll-free line hooked into regional services?
Mr. Speaker, the satellites that have been developed across the province and by the initiative of a number of communities, in the view of those communities, have obviously been seen as an important initiative. This is not the case right across the province. Again, there is a difference of opinion as to the most appropriate way to deal with this problem. Mr. Speaker, we have looked carefully at suggestions that have come from around the province, and this area is now under consideration because, again, we're dealing with, do we put an emphasis on structures? Do we look just at the counseling area, or is it important to address the immediate term, and that's by way of crisis lines? Mr. Speaker, there is not hard evidence in any one of those areas that they are indeed the answer.
Edmonton Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, it's worse than simply not providing positive programs and policies. This department has policies that actually lock women into abusive relationships and do not give them the means to escape. Is the minister aware of her department's policy not to provide damage deposits for an apartment to a woman, to escape from an abusive relationship, to have some place to go before she actually leaves? Their policy is to not...
Thank you, honourable member. It's a long enough question as it is. Thank you. Yes, you have, honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I would disagree completely with the honourable members.
Honourable member, it's not debate or dialogue. Honourable minister.
Well, possibly because the honourable member hasn't fine-tuned his selective hearing. He has just decided to turn it out altogether. I was about to say to the honourable member that I would disagree with the preface to his statement that the policies of the department with respect to damage deposits somehow preclude people from getting out of an abusive situation. Mr. Speaker, the policy with respect to damage deposits deal with single employable people. They do not deal with families.
Thank you, sir. Main question for the Liberal Party, member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a most interesting subject, and I would like to pursue it. Mr. Speaker, yesterday Albertans were fascinated by the Premier's statement that he plans to establish a ministry responsible for the family. He supplemented his comments by telling us that more effort should go into keeping families together through prevention, certainly laudable and proper objective. Mr. Speaker, many people, organizations, communities are already committed and have shown leadership in strengthening family life in our province, and one likes to assume that the Premier has been in touch with them to develop a comprehensive support system. My question to the Premier is, does the Premier acknowledge that a primary cause of family problems and family breakup is financial stress?
Mr. Speaker, frankly, in modern society, there are many items that areas of our society which unfortunately seem to impact in a negative way on the family. Instant communications, huge technological change, where you have more change in a year than whole families used to experience in their lifetime. Financial stress, of course, is one. but there are many others. The important thing to remember here, Mr. Speaker, though, and I recall when I was speaking to some graduating students just the other day, as they go out into a world that is so full of change, they have to have some solid things to hang on to come back to. And I urge them, and I've been urging Albertans, to come back and use as a pillar and for building in the future the family, the home, the community, their religion. Those are things that I think we have to once again emphasize the importance of in Alberta, because our families and all people in this province are besieged by so much change and stress.
Mr. Speaker, no question families are being torn apart, but economic stability is one of the primary things that's missing. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier consider initiatives? We do have suggestions, Mr. Premier, such as pay equity, and further increase to the minimum wage, new employment programs for the hard to employ, low-income housing, a return of the renter's tax credit, all of which would help to alleviate the strain on families.
Thank you, Honourable Member. That's quite a string of questions.
Mr. Speaker, I would welcome in a more comprehensive way for the Honourable Member to provide initiatives. I should point out to her and her caucus the document, Caring and Responsibility, that has been tabled in this House, has a foundation for the growth of the initiatives which the government will be bringing. True, economic stability is a very important part of family and community stability. That's one of the reasons this government has fought so hard to turn the economy around in this province after having been hit in such a dramatic way from the impact on our energy and agricultural economies. And we have fought so hard to diversify, and we've fought so hard to turn the economy around. And we have. And now we are able to once again build. This economy has been turned around. We're able to lower taxes, and there's a whole new feeling of confidence and growth, and we're going to make the family a big part of that, and I welcome your assistance.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier has already heard my comments on this document. Another supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Will the Premier tell the House what new programs does the Premier have in mind that he plans to put in place to help strengthen the family unit?
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting that I just advised the Honourable Member that the document, Caring and Responsibility, is the very foundation for the initiatives. And, Mr. Speaker, not just in this legislature, but throughout Alberta, I will be talking and listening to Albertans throughout the province, because they have ideas, they have initiatives. Already I'm being called by people, and I raise this when I meet with Albertans throughout the province. They have ideas. We will try and build them in. I find that the best advice and the best ideas come from Albertans in their own homes and communities. And so I will continue to listen and welcome throughout this province initiatives from people, because I know this province is a very strong history. Our pioneers in this province were very strong pioneers on the basis of building the province on family and community strength.
Mr. Speaker, a final supplementary. I agree the communities are a fund of information. One wonders, though, who we're listening to. Would the Premier then tell the House what municipalities or particular community family organizations has he discussed this matter of a family ministry with, and what it might be charged with doing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've discussed it with Albertans, I guess, for the full period of time that I have been in my current office. And before, as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, before becoming the leader of our party. And I will always look for opportunities to do it. One of the things I should also point out to the Honourable Member when she was talking about more funds is that there is as much potential for damage to the strength of the family when you have two helpful or too much money being thrown at situations as there is when you don't have as much, because there is a built-in initiative, individual initiative. Now, I know this bothers the socialists because they believe in state responsibility, not individual responsibility. They really believe in the breakdown of the family and this control by the state.
Yeah.
Well, that is exactly what we're not going to allow.
History of socialism.
Supplementary, Edmonton Highlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the Premier has acknowledged that there are about 500,000 poor people in Alberta now, will he commit his government to allowing, or in fact enforcing, an annual review and automatic indexation of the minimum wage so that a lot of those people can finally get out of poverty?
That would do it, Well, Mr. Speaker, it's remarkable how the honourable members are somehow able to draw conclusions other than the ones that are being made. 500,000 people in Alberta in poverty is absolute nonsense. The government is helping 500,000 people by lowering their taxes in a very dramatic way, but that does not equate to the honourable member's argument there are 500,000 people in poverty. As a matter of fact, I recognize why the honourable members, and we understand it, it's not a negative thing on their part, that they would want to try and undermine initiatives to strengthen a family. The socialist view of state responsibility and the state care of children is a fact of life.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. There doesn't seem to be... Chair recognizes the member for Little Bow on the next main question.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the minister responsible for provincial parks. Could the minister indicate at this point in time how many provincial park managers or administrators have been relocated, and how many more does he intend to relocate during this current year?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the opportunity to answer the question from the member. While I won't be specific in the number, I'd undertake to provide that to him in writing. I would like to inform the member just how well the program is going, and it gives me the opportunity to alert all honourable members of the Assembly that of the some 61 provincial parks, that we have 3 in what's called privatization program, and those 3 work very successfully: the Mount Kidd RV Park, the Crimson Lake, and Carson Pegasus. In the 1988 program, we're endeavoring to further privatize 3 other areas, and those being the Wyndham Carsland, the Aspen Beach, and Jarvis Bay. Now, in particular, I'm sure the honourable members making more reference to the fact of specific rangers being relocated from sites where they'd be administrating more than one provincial area. That is an ongoing situation that we're monitoring, and what we're trying to do is assure that the best management level is being offered to all sites, and that we're being efficiently in our management operation.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister, could the minister indicate whether the rearrangement of rangers is for a matter of efficiency and administration, or is it one of cutting back in terms of costs of administering the parks?
Well, Mr. Speaker, certainly there's some cost factors taken into consideration, but not at the lack of quality or standards that we as a department have set in. And I must maintain, Mr. Speaker, to all members of the Assembly, that those standards are amongst the highest in the country. What we're endeavoring to do is where we've had areas of privatization take place, that we'll maintain those standards, but in particular where there's grass cutting, general maintenance, washrooms, and cleaning areas like that, and garbage pickup, we're able then to utilize those rangers in other areas, because we haven't specifically had to look at the staff in those areas. So it's not a downsizing, but it's more efficient management.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the minister indicated that Wyndham Park would be, which is on the Bow River, would be privatized. And the minister has also indicated that the ranger from the Little Bow Park will be moved to Wyndham. Could the minister indicate the reason for that under the privatization program?
Actually, Mr. Speaker, I thought that I'd answered that in the previous question, but more specifically, the ranger's time factor is that he's not having to be responsible for the ongoing operation. The ranger now has more time to be able to look at the overall management of the areas, and in particular in the areas of enforcement, of course, which is one of the areas of responsibility that we would not abdicate. I would like to emphasize to the member that we'll continue to be managers of the resource and certainly would not abdicate any of the responsibilities to the citizens of Alberta which we maintain under the Department of Recreation and Parks.
Final, Mr. Speaker, to the minister. Could the minister indicate when the plans are to move the ranger from the Little Bow Park to the Wyndham Park? Has a date been established at this time, or is there still consideration?
I'm not aware of any specific date at this time, Mr. Speaker, and undertake to provide that to the honourable member. I might say that I am reviewing all the individual cases to ensure that there is no hardships created to any of the individuals, and we'll be talking to them personally as well.
To help Edmonton Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the minister, contracts for maintenance that have been privatized and are now with private contractors, part of the condition of the contract was that they carry their own liability insurance. Now, I've heard that some of those contractors are not carrying sufficient liability insurance, and I wonder if the minister has a monitoring system in place to assure Albertans that that liability insurance is in place.
Yes, a very important question, Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member. I thank him for raising that. We certainly will be monitoring and have realized that it has been a problem to some who originally tendered for the expression of interest when we called for tenders. But we're working with them and will ensure that all legal liability proponents will be in place.
To help the member celebrate his birthday, the chair recognizes Wainwright, followed by Edmonton Calder.
Thank you.
How old are you? Is that the question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Agriculture. The Alberta farms have been losing valuable topsoil at an alarming rate over the past 2 years. With the combination of near drought conditions and recent high windstorms, this problem is getting worse. What steps is this government taking to prevent the further topsoil erosion and deterioration of our farmland?
Mr. Speaker, we have been very active in doing our level best to preserve what we consider our most precious resource within the province of Alberta. And I can go through quite a history relating back to 5 years ago when we established a separate division within our department to enhance soil conservation methods. We've been very active with local municipalities and working with ag service boards. We've been working with a number of soil conservation groups throughout the province. We also just recently signed a $4 million agreement with the federal government. The member from Chinook has just recently introduced legislation as it relates to additional soil conservation methods, Mr. Speaker, so we have quite a litany of support as it relates to our preservation of our most precious resource.
Thank you. Does the Department of Agriculture offer any education programs or services for our farmers to help make them aware of the rehabilitative techniques?
Mr. Speaker, we've got a number of avenues that we do offer support to our farming population, and we work most closely with ag service boards, who in turn do offer that service to our farming population.
Is the government considering any incentive programs that would make up-to-date soil conservation practices more attractive to the Alberta farmers?
Mr. Speaker, one of the programs that we are involved with is with the federal government, and the honourable member is also aware that the federal government recently announced a $75 million incentive as it relates to additional soil conservation methods. We're presently exploring with the federal government areas of mutual concern whereby we can access and supplement that funding for our farmers.
A producer group, Focus on Inputs associations, have proposed an alternative soil conservation method through the use of a cheaper herbicide called Roundup. Has the group asked the Minister for assistance in both research and patent registration of the low-cost generic product called glyphosate, and which is an active ingredient in Roundup?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and we are working with that group to the extent that we are seeking alterations to the present registration regulations at the federal government, whereby if they do have studies already conducted on specific products, they will not require them in the future. And we're working very close with the Focus on Inputs group, whereby we can hopefully have that regulation altered.
Edmonton Calder, Athabasca Laklabish, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister or the Associate Minister, will the Minister encourage through changes through the hail and crop insurance program where valid condition exists, the paying out of hail and crop insurance for forage crops so that farmers are not forced to be growing cereal crops in times of serious drought conditions?
Speaker, that's a good question, but the honourable member would know that this year we expanded the forage program to cover the entire province, and I was down in Vauxhall last week and I looked at some land down there that was badly wind eroded. I would certainly encourage farmers to use good husbandry and soil conservation methods and rotation to ensure that we do in fact protect the soil.
Member for Edmonton Calder, followed by Edmonton Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, my questions are to the Minister of Social Services. A social services study conducted in 1985 in the Edmonton region estimated that on any given night, up to 130 homeless youth were living in our streets. The majority were between the ages of 16 and 18. However, when the Minister comments on programs for these kids, she says, and I quote, "Many parents believe that we have contributed to their young people leaving home by virtue of just having programs for them." To the Minister, will the Minister elaborate her position? Does she agree with these parents that programs for young people should not be encouraged because they simply result in young people leaving home?
Mr. Speaker, obviously, if we didn't believe that there were some youth that needed assistance outside the family, we wouldn't have programs and we wouldn't be funding youth emergency shelters in various parts of the province.
Supplementary to the Minister, well, in view of the fact that the majority of young people on our streets are escaping from physical and sexual abuse, I would ask the Minister, when will she accept the responsibility and provide adequate programs to meet the needs of these young people on our streets?
Mr. Speaker, once again, there may be a difference of opinion as to what the term adequate may mean, because there are certainly a number of programs to deal with this particular area. But, Mr. Speaker, as well, the young people are in a situation, I think, that if word is properly spread, know that there is assistance for them. And at any time, they can come to the Department of Social Services and seek that assistance.
Supplementary to the Minister, the majority of child welfare workers and community agencies write in the study that was conducted by her department would disagree that there's adequate programs. And as the program at Edmonton's 105th Street District Office, which provides for 16 and 17-year-olds in crisis, is regarded as a very successful program, will the Minister expand this program to make it accessible to all youth who are homeless throughout this province?
Mr. Speaker, there are many different situations that cause a youth to be homeless. And one of them certainly is a situation where there is a family disagreement. And in the cases of parents who have brought this to my attention, in no way were these young people in any type of danger at all. There was a very strong disagreement as to what the rules in the family home were going to be. And it is always a very fine line that one walks in terms of presenting an opportunity for all young people who have family disagreements to leave their home.
Final supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Well, the majority are abused. That's a fact. And there is currently a lack of long-term treatment programs for teenagers who have been abused. One youth just gave up hope and went back to the streets. And I'd ask the Minister, when will she commit her department to develop and fund long-term treatment programs for these young people that are on our streets?
Well, Mr. Speaker, once again, the honourable member is speaking in generalities, and I would invite the honourable member to raise the specific situations where, in fact, these young people, with their own concurrence, would come forward, seek assistance from the Department of Social Services, seek upgrading of an education, which is critically important and many times is a component that is lacking in the lives of these youngsters.
Chair recognizes Edmonton Goldbar, supplementary.
A supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister. Will the Minister please set up one central intake point in our cities where young people can achieve social assistance, housing, assistance in getting an employment or getting back into school?
Mr. Speaker, while that is an administrative item, I think that it has some important ramifications in terms of consideration, and that doesn't mean that I would discount it, but it is very important on a geographic basis as best we can to offer services around the city and then direct those young people to a specific area. And for instance, it has already been mentioned that there are specialists in this area. And I will take the honourable member's suggestion under consideration.
Edmonton Meadowlark, main question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in this assembly, the Premier said, and I quote, "Our initiative is to strengthen the family, to provide reasons why the family is stronger, why mothers will stay in the house, in the family, while not having care outside the house." Mr. Speaker, the Premier obviously has an outdated definition of family which, in his mind, does and should consist of father as breadwinner, mother as homemaker, and I would presume 2.2 children. To the Premier, and a dog. To the Premier, is the Premier aware that only 16% of Canadian families fit that traditional model?
Back to the 50s. Mr. Speaker, one thing I'm very pleased about, that I certainly got the opposition's attention on this issue, and I will welcome the discussion. I find it a very stimulating one, and one that we should have. As far as the honourable member's statistics, nobody knows better than I do, Mr. Speaker, the ways in which the family has changed, and that's one of the reasons that the initiatives to assist the family are so complex and so tough to get hold of, because we want to assist the family in all its forms under modern society.
That's not what you said yesterday. Does the Premier believe that families, other families which make up 84% of the population of this country and commensurately of this province, are somehow less effective or less valuable than the traditional family which he describes, and that their choices are less worthy or less necessary than his view of what those choices should be?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have now a perfect case of the honourable member asking me his first question, which I responded to. He's then read the second question prepared in advance and didn't listen to my answer, because I said I recognize the diversity of the makeup of families. I don't put down any family of any kind. I merely say that the initiatives to assist the family are difficult to develop because the family is so diverse in its makeup in modern society.
The Premier emphasized a view of the family that keeps women in the home. Is it the Premier's intention to turn the economic, political, and social clock back to the 1950s by trying to implement policies which support only 16% of the population?
Again, I guess, Mr. Speaker, he's going to stick with these questions that were prepared in advance of the question period. I'll only say this to the honourable member, that the parent care of the family, the child, is one that cannot be replaced by the state. The state can help, Mr. Speaker, when parents are unable to care or need assistance to care for their families, their children. But the ultimate responsibility for the care of children lies with the parents, not with the state.
One of the ultimate responsibilities of the state is to assist in providing equality of opportunity. What plans does the Premier have to address the needs of 84% of the population, needs which include, whether he likes it or not, adequate daycare programs, adequate family planning programs, adequate domestic violence prevention and protection?
And that's adequate, honourable member. That's order, order, order. This is the final supplementary. The honourable member has more than had ample opportunity to ask a series of questions and has indeed been asking more than one question on some of the supplementaries. Time for question period has expired. Might we have unanimous consent to complete this series of questions? Opposed? Carried. Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, might I say the members of the Liberal caucus ought to at least consult in advance of the House, because they've asked the same question. What initiatives does the government have? And I've told them about the caring and responsibility paper. I've told them about requesting their assistance. And now both members have asked the same question. I want to say one more thing about the honourable member's lead-in to his question. There is no effort on this government to downplay the essential role of daycare. There is no part of our initiatives to help families that will downplay the essential need for help for their battered parent or child. We are going, Mr. Speaker, to continue to help where help is needed in those areas. And as a matter of fact, the record of this government is the best in Canada. The only province that has enough daycare spaces for the demand. The only province. No one comes even close. But, Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to try and reverse the trend which has been to break down the family unit. Because I come back to a basic philosophy of progressive conservative government.
Thank you, Honourable Premier. Chair directs Edmonton Meadowlark to cease and desist. Is it some kind of disease the member has picked up with his leader not in the House? There's this difficulty of trying to shout down the answer, and it was brought to the attention of the House yesterday, and with respect, honourable members, perhaps we can let the answers happen. On a supplementary, Red Deer North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Notwithstanding the erroneous 16% statistic, can the Premier tell us, in light of the fact that most families in this province, even the single-parent ones, at one time were traditional two-parent families, is he intending to enact measures that will support two-parent families that are under stress?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker, and I would hope that we can develop in this difficult, complex area initiatives to provide a great deal of assistance in binding together and strengthening families under stress of any makeup, because there is no question that as we deal in this rapidly changing society that we live in, of rapid technological change, instant communications from throughout the world, bombarded by information, that we have to provide something solid for our young people and older, I guess, something solid to come back to, a base of solidity that they can count on to help them in these ever-changing times. And I repeat what I said before, that will be a place of love and strength, the home, the family, the community, and faith.
Thank you.
Premier, because the Premier often says things and he says he's misquoted, but the member from Meadowlark did, quote, answered adequately, where he said mothers will stay in the house and the family will not having care outside of the house. Now the Premier seems to be saying something different. Will he clarify precisely then what he means when he talks about the family? What's his vision of the family?
Good.
Mr. Speaker, I have taken the time to describe already to members the diverse nature of families in our modern society. When I talk about a mother being one who cares for the home, I want to make it very clear that I believe that a home is hardly a home without a mother. You cannot replace a mother in a home. There are obviously now in our diverse nature of our society where we have a family where the single parent is the father. That we accept. It happens. And we will help in that case too. But there's no question in my mind that probably the strongest source of love in a home will always be the mother.
Supplementary information, Minister, briefly.
I thought in light of the very important comments made by the Premier and the erroneous statistics and conclusions gathered by the Honourable Member for Edmonton Meadowlark, that the House ought to understand that as he quotes statistics, he is also dealing with the many thousands of women out there who are my age, and our children are growing up, so we are not taking a job in the workplace while our children are at home.
Time for question period has expired. No. Order, please, honourable member. Order. As occurs throughout question period, honourable members, from time to time, the questions get directed, for example, to the Premier, a comment is made, and then supplementary information is given at that time, and that's exactly what has occurred here. It's not a request to have given supplementary information to questions that had arisen earlier on. Good. What is the point of order, Edmonton Meadowlark?
Mr. Speaker, it is procedure in this legislature that if a minister gets up at the end of question period and provides supplementary information to a question asked earlier in the day, that member is entitled a supplementary question. The minister may have been trying to provide her information under the ruse of providing supplementary information to the Premier's answer to the Leader of the Opposition, but in fact she addressed me personally, and I get to ask a supplementary question if there is to be any consistency in the rules in this House.
Very briefly, the question which elicited the additional information from the Honourable Minister is the very last question, and it's just at the close of that question, the responses to that question. It isn't a response to questions asked earlier in the question period. It's a response to that question.
As the House Leader for the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To be very brief on this point of order, I think that what would clarify this issue is that you had said supplementary information with a question mark attached prior to the minister standing. Ordinarily, the procedure that we agreed to about 2 years ago was that when ministers at the end of question period respond to that question, is there supplementary information from the minister gives the information. The questioner that was cited either in that response or the questioner to whom the response is being given then has the right to ask a supplementary question. The minister would still get final word. She would still have the final chance to respond to that supplementary question. Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is if you hadn't said supplementary information, if she had rose and said, I want to supplement the Premier's answer, it might be a little hazy, but I think under these circumstances it's very clear.
Honourable Minister, and then that will be it.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is certainly my belief that it was my first opportunity to supplement the information given by the Honourable Premier, and it was not a supplementary information at the end of question period. It is quite by chance that it happened at this point in time.
Part of the difficulty involved is that the Leader of the Opposition then rose and made reference to the member for Edmonton Meadowlark. That in turn then was referred to in the additional information supplied to the House by the Minister of Social Services. In that circumstance, it wouldn't necessarily mean that the member for Meadowlark had the right to respond to any comment made at that time. However, if indeed the chair did say supplementary information when the chair should have said additional information, and since I haven't got recourse that speedily to Hansard in this one instance only without setting a precedent, that because the thing all occurred at the end of question period, the chair will then allow Edmonton Meadowlark to ask a brief supplementary question. That does not mean with 2 or 3 or 4 or 18 parts, and the minister will then be allowed to respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Social Services, who correctly acknowledges that older women choose to go back to the workforce later in life, could she please indicate what programs her government is considering to assist those women to make the transition back to the workforce and to assist...
Thank you, Honourable Member. That's sufficiently succinct.
As we speak about women who are mature and seek to... I have often heard us characterized as having character as opposed to being old or mature. Mr. Speaker, I would say that with respect to a number of departments, whether it be the department under the Honourable Rick Orman in career development or advanced education, that there are many programs available, and I would assure the Honourable Member he needn't fear this age because we have a fair capacity to respond and be responsible on our own behalf.
Thank you. Time for question period has expired. Are there additional points of order? Edmonton Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, I rise under Section 23J of the Standing Orders of the Legislature. I believe that your comment in reference to a comparison of me to or statements that I was making to statements that the leader of our party made yesterday would fall under that category. I won't read it. I know that it's difficult, your job, and at times it's of course requires split-second decision making, but I do think that that comment was out of order, and I just raise it for your consideration.
Thank you, Honourable Member, but the comment was hardly abusive or insulting language. The chair made the observation that the same issue had arisen yesterday with the member for Westlock Sturgeon, and the chair apologizes if it did indeed strike a raw nerve with the Honourable Member. Orders of the day.
Written questions.
Mr. Speaker,